Have you heard of Arizona mermaids? No, you're not having a stroke. You heard me correctly. Arizona actually has mermaid legends. Legends, as in multiple. And I am so excited to tell you about them. If you've been following AZ Unveiled for a while, you might remember my trailer video.
Do you ever think to yourself that you'd like to travel around Arizona, but only if the trip can be spooky and real fucking weird? Have you ever driven by this sign on Interstate 10 and been tempted to stop? Do you want to know what the this thing is?
I realized I teased you with this horrifyingly absurd creature and then never came back to tell you what it actually was. My bad. I blame the ADHD, but I'm going to tell you about it now. And to win back your favor, I'm going to tell you about an additional Arizona mermaid legend, the Mogollon Mermaid. So this taxidermy nightmare is the petrified remains of a mermaid captured off the coast of Vietnam, or more specifically, a merman, at least according to its informational placard. It's on display in Tombstone, Arizona at the Birdcage Theater of all places. The placard reads, "This is a member of the family of Nereid that inhabited the China Sea many centuries ago. This specimen having been captured in the Gulf of Tonkin about 500 miles from Hong Kong. It belonged to the species of herbivorous cetacean. They occasionally wandered into more northern seas and invariably caused great excitement among seamen. Don't. They were quite frequently seen by Arab and Greek seamen many years ago, but they are now an almost extinct type of animal life." Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First, it being part of the Nereid family. That's a whole other rabbit hole into Greek mythology, which is way outside of my wheelhouse, but I will try my best. The too long didn't read version is that Nereids are nymphs, which are goddesses of nature. The Nereids are more specifically sea nymphs and are the 50 daughters of Nereus, aka the Old Man of the Sea. He is a god of the sea, most often associated with the Aegean Sea. The Nereids were known for their ethereal beauty with long flowing hair, silk robes, and sometimes a delicate crown of red coral. They were truly a sight to behold. So, back to the Tombstone Mermaid. By the by, what's with Tombstone having all of these weird cryptids? Why there? I'm going to have to make another shirt. The placard calls the Tombstone Mermaid a merman and says that it's part of the Nereid family. However, all of the Nereids were female, save for one. So are the finders of Tombstone Mermaid claiming that this one is Neretes, the one and only male Nereid? Maybe. It seems highly unlikely. The other problem is that the placard claims it was from a family that inhabited the China Sea. As far as I can tell, the Nereids were never found in the China Sea. They lived in the Aegean Sea. Also, from my very scientific research conducted solely on Google, Nereids and mermaids seem to be different species. So which is the Tombstone specimen? Is it a Nereid or a mermaid? Maybe I'm just being pedantic again, but is it too much to ask for a little continuity? Discrepancies aside, how the hell did this weird little guy end up in Tombstone, Arizona? Disclaimer. If you want to keep the illusion that this weird little critter is actually a mermaid, just skip ahead a little bit. Okay, for those of you that are still here, I'm about to be a real buzzkill. But I promise the truth is just as weird, if not weirder. So let's go back a few hundred years, shall we? And a few continents over. And please bear with me, I don't mean to, but I will probably butcher these pronunciations. In Japan, during the Edo period, which was roughly the 1600s to the 1800s, mizumonos were very popular. These were basically part carnival, part museum, part zoo, and part freak show, all rolled into one fun little bundle. At these mizumonos, mythical animal exhibits were incredibly popular. They included attractions like an incredibly rare miniature tiger, which by sheer coincidence only had the exact same size and general appearance of a house cat. An even more popular attraction were creatures called ningo, which in Japanese folklore were similar to mermaids. The word ningo actually translates to human fish because they were part human and part fish. Though they weren't always split nicely in half like their Western counterparts. Sometimes they had a human head and the rest of the body was a fish. From coneyisland.com. Ningyo is a genderless, human-like monkey-fish hybrid. One of the earliest records of this human-fish hybrid creature is in the Nihon Shoki, one of the oldest books in Japanese history. The book was compiled in 720 AD and contains Japan's early mythology. The earliest record of the word ningyo is from 937 AD in Japan's oldest Japanese-Chinese dictionary. Later books of tales and historical records describe fishermen catching fish with human heads, the face of a monkey, and the bodies and teeth of a fish. Terrifying. Some stories say they tasted delicious, and owning one offered protection from illness. Others said they were bad omens, and when they washed ashore, disaster should be expected. While the Mizumonos didn't have live ningyos on display, they had the next best thing, ningyo mummies, amazing relics of a mysterious and elusive species that once roamed the sea. Just kidding. The mummies were a disturbing amalgamation of juvenile monkey torso, fishtail, paper mache, and human hair. Fun! These ningyo exhibits certainly drew crowds, and these kinds of attractions often cost extra to see, something like an extra 15 cents to 55 cents. But in the early 1800s, when the head of the Dutch trading colony purchased one of these ningyo for $5,000, about $137,000 today, Japanese sailors quickly learned that they could make way more money selling these things to foreigners. And they did. One particular ningyo found its way into the hands of American Captain Samuel Barrett Eads. Now, there are a couple different versions of how this came to be. In one version, Captain Eads came upon a sinking Dutch merchant ship and rescued its crew, ningyo among them. Eads was so captivated by it, he had to have it, but he had to sell his ship in order to afford its $5,000 price tag. Again, about $137,000 today. In the other version, Eads paid for it with a little-known financial hack called embezzling. Either way, Eads came into possession of the ningyo, which he exhibited in Cape Town and then in London. He charged people 1 shilling to see it. Eads was convinced it was real and wanted a naturalist to back him up on it. But when he invited a couple of naturalists to come look at it, they declared it was fake, because of course they did. Eads didn't like that answer, so he may or may not have claimed that the prominent naturalist had declared it was real. Obviously, this backfired or got out via one very angry naturalist that Eads' ningyo was fake. After that, his exhibit tanked, and Eads was never able to pay back the money that he borrowed. When he died, Eads willed the ningyo to his son, who very much did not want it. I can't imagine why. I mean, it's definitely not cursed. Just look at it. His son eventually sold it to Moses Kimball, who ran the Boston Museum. Kimball then invited his buddy P.T. Barnum to come look at it. Yes, that would be the Barnum from Ringling Bros. Barnum and Bailey Circus. Barnum was quite interested in the creature, but he too wanted to have a naturalist authenticate it. But that naturalist was also like, what the f-? No, obviously it's not real because mermaids don't exist. But Barnum was never one to let little things like the truth or morality get in the way of making money. He created an elaborate backstory for the ningyo, including the character Dr. Griffin, who worked at the British Lyceum of Natural History and found this ningyo in South America, except Barnum called it the Fiji mermaid and advertised it like this. A beautiful woman with long flowing hair, quite the bait and switch. It worked though. Barnum's Fiji mermaid was wildly popular, so much so that many others in the US began manufacturing their own Fiji mermaids. By the 1930s, the mermaids became a staple in Robert Ripley's auditoriums. That is, the Robert Ripley of Ripley's Believe It or Not. But by then, the public knew they were fake, so Ripley advertised them as Barnum's hoaxes. That's good marketing. They have since ended up in museums all over the world. All of that, and I still haven't told you how a mermaid ended up in Tombstone, Arizona. Well, one of the ningos, or Fiji mermaids, was on display in the National Museum of China. That is, until it was purchased by the Fukuo & Co., a dealer of Oriental imports in San Francisco. The next part of its journey is a bit unclear, but it somehow or other ended up in the hands of a man named Kwang Ki, who is quite possibly the cutest old man I have ever seen. Kwang Ki kept the mermaid on display for years at his Tombstone restaurant, which was called the Can Can Restaurant. In 1934, not long before his death, he donated the mermaid to the Birdcage Theater, where it has been haunting the display case ever since. Speaking of horrifying taxidermy, it reminds me of these things. I've seen them called Asquatches. If I ever win the lottery, I would buy one of these for every single one of my friends. You're welcome in advance. Now, I promised you not one, but 2 mermaid legends. So you're gonna get 2 mermaid legends. I don't know if that's a promise or a threat. Take it as you will. The second cryptid is one that I hadn't even heard of, and not to brag, but I know quite a lot of weird things about Arizona. I could only find it mentioned in this one single article, and I'm not even sure where their sources come from, but we're gonna run with it. If you've ever heard of it though, definitely let me know in the comments, please, please. I want to know from where. From said article, the Mogollon monster mermaid is a half-human, half-fish creature that lurks in the depths of the region's waterways. Eyewitnesses describe it as having the upper body of a beautiful woman with long, flowy hair and mesmerizing eyes. But below the waist, the creature is said to have a scaly serpentine tail like something out of a nightmare. More impossible beauty standards. But I too strive to be something from a man's nightmare. Anyway, for reference, the Mogollon Rim is a 200-foot geological feature running diagonally across the northern half of Arizona, from the Arizona-New Mexico border to northern Yavapai County. It forms the southern edge of the Colorado Plateau. The Mogollon Rim is an escarpment, and since my geology is quite rusty, I had to look that up. Google defines an escarpment as a steep slope or long cliff that forms where the land abruptly changes elevation. So basically, the Mogollon Rim is an abrupt 2,000 to 3,000 foot drop off. Terrifying, but very pretty. Something else I strive to be. So like most mermaid legends, the Mogollon version is known for using an enchanting song to lure boaters and swimmers to their death. She can shapeshift, of course, into a beautiful woman, fully human, with legs instead of the fishtail, but she can take it a step further and shapeshift into the appearance of a long-lost loved one. Dad, the legend of the Mogollon Mermaid dates back to at least the 1950s. A group of Boy Scouts were camping out at Black Canyon Lake, where they claimed to see a strange creature lurking out in the water. The boys described the creature as half-human, having the face and torso of a woman. But rather than legs, this woman had a long, scaly tail. The boys must have come out of that incident unscathed, because that was the entirety of the story, so far as I could tell. The next and only other story I could find jumps ahead to 2012. This time, a couple was camping near Woods Canyon Lake. From the article, the couple reported hearing eerie siren-like vocalizations coming from the water late at night. They claimed the sounds were unlike anything they'd ever heard before, a haunting melody that seemed to call out to them from the depths. I will say, I grew up going to Woods Canyon Lake frequently. My dad used to take my brother and I fishing there quite often when we were kids, and we never saw or heard anything like the Mogollon Mermaid. I did get surrounded by a mob of hungry squirrels and blue jay once after I made the mistake of feeding them Cheetos and Oreos. It started with just 1 or 2 of them, but before I knew it, there was at least a dozen creatures surrounding me, closing in and staring me down in the most menacing way a squirrel or a blue jay could. It might not have been a haunting siren luring me to my death, but it felt pretty terrifying to 6-year-old me. Anyway, now you know. Even Arizona has mermaid legends, and whether she's haunting a quiet lake along the Mogollon Rim or taxidermied into what looks like eternal agony inside a Tombstone museum, her myth lives on. That's going to wrap up this episode. But if you like these weird and creepy stories, there's definitely more where that came from. I send even more weird stories straight to your inbox twice a month in my free email series that I call the Phantom Post Box. You can sign up at the link below. And if you want to show support for the show while looking pretty damn rad, if I do say so myself, I've got some sweet, spooky desert merch in the shop, like this one, the mighty Tombstone Thunderbird, also linked below. If you haven't watched the Tombstone Thunderbird episode yet, you absolutely should. I will put that here somewhere. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, comment, subscribe, do all the things so I can keep making more weird and spooky videos for you. As always, I'm Emily, and this is AZ Unveiled. I will see you where the desert gets dark. It belonged to the species of herbivorous. The earliest record of the word ningo. Anyway, the placard calls